I'll jump right in then. Thanks for having me. My name's Maddie. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Mount, and essentially we're a software platform that allows you to rent anything at any time to anyone. Now, the shared economy is massive, and that was a really broad statement. So where Mount decided to root ourselves was in the travel industry, and specifically within the Airbnb market. And it's really the fact that amenity-based revenue and really other revenue streams are really hard to tap into. For example, your classic Airbnb host is making 99% of their revenue directly from bookings. So that means they don't really have the opportunity to capitalize on the guests when they're staying at their property. And this was really hard fact to come to terms with during COVID-19 when these hosts lost 65% of their bookings and they could no longer run a profitable business. So Mount dug into the problem a little more and understands now that travelers are currently paying for upsells. 83% of the worldwide travel community is actively seeking out these experiences, these fun things to do when you travel, these local experiences, and they're paying for them to the tune of $9.2 billion. So that's how much is currently spent every year by these travelers, just for amenities, for experiences, activities. And that's all the stuff the host really can't get access to. So the Mount solution, our platform, is what we've created to give these hosts access to that revenue. We can take essentially everything else they own other than the house, and we turn it into a rentable amenity for travelers. So we simply put on a GPS tracker QR code onto the amenity, take a golf cart, for example, a kayak, a paddleboard, you name it. It becomes a rentable amenity with our technology. And then when the guest shows up, they download the Mount app and they can see everything they can possibly rent, and they can rent it within the app. So the reason why Mount is so unique and is caught fire in this industry is for three reasons. First of all, we have a transactional app. So currently the way an Airbnb host, a short-term rental host would do this if they wanted to, is they could put a bike on their property and try and offer it to their guests. But they would have to either ask you for a cash compensation, which is hard because a lot of these hosts never greet you in person, or they'd have to ask you what your Venmo is and trust that you pay them. So Mount created a payment solution within our app so that the guests can do it on site. We also created a custom-built insurance policy. So this is a huge reason why hosts don't do this themselves. And this insurance policy covers all of the injury liability. So if you list a bike and someone hurts themselves via a Mount rental, that part of it is covered. That insurance policy is impossible to get as an individual, which is why Airbnb hosts can't do this. Or if they do luck out and get through the process, they're spending $100,000 a year for that policy to rent one bike, and they'll never see a profit. Our last really game changer with Mount is our GPS tracking component. So everything a host lists on our platform is GPS tracked, so they know where it's going, when it's coming back, and in what condition. So that way they can have a peace of mind if they're listing a $20,000, $30,000 golf cart, they know when it's coming back and how that guest is treating it. So the market is actually quite massive. This is a market breakdown based on amenities and the revenue they generate. So the initial market we're starting is within the United States, a $2.5 billion market for Mount. And when you open it up globally, looking at $115 billion. And that's just within the short-term rental industry. You'll see later why Mount is so unique. Our business model is quite interesting. We take money from two customers. We charge $15 a month per host to the host per amenity. So a SaaS fee essentially, and they get access to the insurance, the payment tools, and all the value I just mentioned. And then on top of that, we add a 20% service fee to the rental. So if the host puts $10 an hour, the guest will rent it for $12, and that's where our fee is coming from. Now, the biggest objection we've gotten so far is that the Airbnb market is dispersed. There's 7 million hosts worldwide. How on earth are we going to find them all? So we have 2 points of attack.
1 minute warning.
Yeah, I got you. Our first is our social media influencers. So these people teach hundreds of thousands of hosts how to do what they've done because they're quite successful. And we got in contact with a few, went viral in a Facebook group, and actually got 10,000 properties signed up on our waitlist in the last few months. That encompasses 46 different countries, proving Mount is a global needed solution. Now, our larger scalable strategy has to do with the software tech stack already in our industry, Airbnb being one of them, but hundreds of companies beneath that. We integrate with them, and that's how we get access to our 7 million properties and hosts globally. At a flip of a switch, they all get instant access to list Mount amenities. So we are going after a massive industry, starting with hospitality, but as it turns out, every piece of private property needs rentable amenities. So going into office, multifamily, and retail. So thank you so much, and happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. And thank you for sharing, Madison. It's a super interesting. I know this would definitely have been helpful for our trip to Greece, and I'm pretty sure everybody can relate here. Let me pull in Pratibha and myself. And Pratibha, do you want to take things away? What
Yeah.
questions do you have for Mount?
Firstly, thank you so much, Madison. Great pitch. Just and love the whole reuse economy angle. Curious about your theory of change or impact. Could you speak to a bit about what is your vision for the kind of environmental impact you are looking to achieve through, or social impact, if you will, through your company?
Yeah, fantastic question. So really the Mount vision, and you'll actually see this if you go on our website, is in the next 5 years, getting this travel demographic of people to really travel with a backpack and then rent everything they need in destination, from their purse to a ball gown they might need for a wedding, to the bike. So really everything. And that way we can reduce this term we've coined called single-use travel, where, we were actually in Hawaii for 3 months and we had the local travel economy showing up and then purchasing those inflatable floaties, using them for 5 days, and then throwing them away. And the cycle continued from there. Yeah. And it's dependent on each market, but that single-use travel is kind of destroying, I guess, the environment. So that's what we're trying to get people away from doing.
Great. And curious on what makes you and your co-founder the unique folks to be able to tackle this problem?
Another good one. So I guess it didn't come across in the 5-minute pitch because limited time, but I have been doing Mount since I was 12 years old. So I started on this journey. It was a bike lock company. And then with a string of 8 to 9 pivots over the last 12-ish years, kind of have landed in this amazing shared economy where there was an actual problem. I would say bike locks, not so much. But because of that and that journey where I actually met my co-founder a few years ago, and we've kind of been persistent and on this journey, that would make us kind of unique to do this and solve this problem. And then along the way, have met many industry experts that are now backing Mount, working for Mount. We're a full-time team of 10 right now to kind of grow this and take it to the next level.
Love the passion here, Madison. And I know of the space pretty well. We've made a couple of investments in the reuse space. Just curious about how are you thinking about the comps within the market that are attempting a version of this, right? Like you have some that are looking at parents, the moms, the use for children's equipment and amenities. Some are looking at the office space and looking at how you could be reusing furniture, and the others. Like where do you play, and what's your closest comparable in the market?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question, because the shared economy has been around for upwards of 12 years now. I think in the recent years it's become quite popular and more widely adopted, so people are willing to rent things from each other. But when we look at our competitors, a lot of them have already failed and don't exist anymore. One called Ruckify, another called Fat Llama, which is actually based in the UK. They took the very opposite approach of Mount, where they decided to tackle the entire shared economy at once. So basically rooting it within communities, which is a very vague word. And you could rent a saw, a bike, like literally anything. And they failed because they didn't root that shared economy in something. And it's kind of, you're not going to get enough people that need to rent a saw and then also a bike. And it's just, you're not going to get enough usage. The reason Mount is quite different is because we rooted it in travel within a shared economy that already existed, which is Airbnb. So what we found is these travelers show up and they want to rent a bike. They're doing it already. We're just making it a lot more convenient. So our utilization is pretty high. So in that sense, I'm not too worried about our competitors. And then if you look directly in the short-term rental industry, we're actually the only company doing what we're doing right now, rooted in technology. The other shared economies have to facilitate it with people. So if you want to list, your lawnmower for rent, you have to be there to facilitate it, and that's not a full-time job. With Mount, everything is self-service. So you can list that lawnmower and you don't have to be there when it's being rented. So a lot of differences.
Got it. And the last question before I just hand it over to Matt, over the next 12 to 18 months, what are your key milestones you're looking to achieve?
So we are in the tail end of closing our proper seed raise. So we were raising 2, became oversubscribed. Now we're closing 3 million. We have about 500,000 left. Closing that by the end of this year, and then using that money, we have a few key hires we want to make with those milestones. So one being a customer success kind of head that can build that team out, really building our sales team out because our software is in a place where it's ready to be utilized. And over the next 12 to 18 months, really growing our revenue, hitting anywhere from 4,000 to 8,000 amenities on the platform that are live and being used, getting us in a position where we can raise a solid Series A, potentially hitting $1 million in transaction volume every month on the platform. That's kind of our North Star. And really proving out within this kind of smaller 4,000 to 8,000 amenities that Mount is a profitable business model. We can raise that Series A and then just really grow from there.
Thank you, Madison. Over to you, Matt.
Are you a business or an Airbnb feature?
I would say 100% a business. And we like to say that we're finishing what Airbnb started.
They started to do this and then kind of gave up due to COVID because they had to cut back on headcount. Are you worried that they will then implement what you guys are doing once they start to have things running a bit smoother at the Airbnb headquarters?
No, and there's a few reasons. One of our investors is General Catalyst, so we have pretty close ties to Airbnb as it is because they were early investors there. Through a lot of research and conversations, Brian, the founder of Airbnb, his grand vision was to incorporate this. And as you just mentioned, they tried and failed with Airbnb experiences. The reason they failed so miserably, in my opinion, is that they didn't tie the two platforms together. So if you rented an Airbnb, you kind of had to go do your own research and figure out what an experience was you should be. And then they didn't vet any of the experiences. Like I did one in Portugal, thought I was getting a local for a bike experience, and turns out he was, fresh from Hungary and had never been to Portugal before. So it was kind of a weird experience. So they lost a lot of credibility. The reason they're not going to continue down that path and they're not going to do what Mount is doing is because Mount comes down to being asset management. The goal is to have over 100,000 amenities on our platform, handling that customer service and making sure it's a humming business. Airbnb doesn't want to take on the management of 100,000 assets when they're already working with 7 million hosts and properties. So they're going to stick with their bread and butter, which is properties and that growth. We're going to stick with ours, hopefully grow together. We have a partnership with them in the works. But I don't see them doing what we're doing.
Can you get General Catalyst to connect you to what's his name as an advisor?
Brian.
Yeah, if you can get them inbred into the company, that would be a good way for them to either eventually acquire you guys or hopefully not knock you off.
Exactly. And what I've done too is I took it a step further. So Airbnb has 4 or 5 main competitors: Airbnb, Hopper, VRBO, and then Booking.com. They're all kind of racing to market to figure out who can get the best share. I pit them all against each other. So we actually have investors and advisors from a lot of those companies, so that Airbnb doesn't own Mount in sense of lording over us, but we have pin their competitors against each other to see who can work with Mount the fastest.
Network effects are great, except when you have to build them. And they're phenomenal, except when you have to build them internationally. So the Airbnb was almost a miracle in that it worked because you have to have it work when you go somewhere else, which means you have to have it work everywhere. Otherwise, it's not something. How do you handle that? Are you going just directly after market by market, onboarding the Airbnb host and the hosts onboard the users?
So not going market by market. We took a very similar growth approach to Airbnb where we hooked into their network and basically created a referral program. So once we work with a host in Denver, they basically go and sign up all the hosts in Denver. So you can capture a market pretty quickly and they get that referral revenue. But in my pitch, I did mention we went viral in the industry. It's actually through conferences. That's how you meet everyone. That's how we signed up those 10,000 properties over 46 different countries. So we have in our growth model, we're prepared to go international pretty quickly for that reason. It's what Airbnb did actually, I think unintentionally, but it worked for them. So it's in our model as well.
But how many amenities do you need per market for that to be able to be something feasible? So it's not just you can start, you've got to have enough for it to be worthwhile. Otherwise, it's a party with all guys or all girls. It's not interesting for the other side.
No, so actually that's not how Mount works, because technically, if you have amenities at one property, there's travelers coming directly to that property, and that host is telling them ahead of time, hey, this property has Mount amenities. rent and use them. So we actually have markets where we have 1 to 2 properties. It's Missouri, really random one. But, the travelers are coming to that property. That property is booked on average 65% of the time. So our utilization and customers are kind of built in. It's the reason we went with Airbnbs and hospitality to begin with. You don't have to go find travelers. They're showing up to the cities.
No, it's very cool.
And quick question, Madison, how much are you looking to raise in total to hit the kind of profitability or sustainable business that you are envisioning?
So yeah, as I said, we're closing the 3 million right now. The target for our Series A is around an $8 million to $10 million round. And then from there, we should be able to prove out profitability and kind of just grow from there. So we'll see after that Series A how big we want to get and how much more money we want to pump in, but that is the target.
And what is the yellow flags that you are anticipating over the 12 to 24 months, given turn in macro conditions and how, as economic headwinds are starting to surface, travel can get potentially impacted?
Yeah, I would say it's a yellow-ish green flag because the recession in the looming, I guess, market is exciting to Mount, because that's how Airbnb started. And it's why this new trend was created, was because people wanted a cheaper way to travel, not hotels. That's why Airbnb existed. And then also on the flip side, people needed more income streams. So the exact same thing is happening again, although it's not how do I become a host? It's how do I make more revenue per door? And for the last 5 to 6 years, everyone has been asking themselves, how do I get more doors? And now that's not the opportunity. It's more revenue. And Mount is the only answer to that question in our industry right now. And so that's why the next 12 to 18 months are so crucial, is we need to capitalize on, the demand of what people are demanding Mount, and we need to capitalize on it.
Thank you.
And if you fail, why will it be?
I would say it's because we wouldn't be able to move fast enough and have enough people in place to capitalize on that demand. Because, if you don't capitalize on the demand, wait 18 months, it might not be there. People might have moved on to the next thing. So the next year and a half will be crucial for us.
How do you handle the Uber problem of anyone can enter every market and put up a fight as long as they have enough cash to burn?
Like the professionalization of it?
Not the professionalization. So there was Uber and there was Lyft, and then there were like 1,700 others, and every city was starting their own little one, and they were throwing $1 million or 10 million or 100 million at it, and money was getting burned left and right, only to find out actually it still even might not today be a profitable business. But that's another story. But the issue was, because it had the local network effects, it had to be valuable where you were based, and that's challenging. It doesn't have the global. You guys have the global for travelers, but you don't have necessarily the global for providers of the services.
Yeah, honestly, great question. I didn't get to talk about it, but Mount's really big defensibility is the way our software works. We built API first, and it allows us to integrate into existing tech stacks of a property. So typically they'll have a property management software. On top of that, they'll have their booking channel, which is Airbnb and others. We integrate into the property management software, who have already curated and found all of these hosts globally. So maybe they have 50,000, they have 100,000. That's what makes us so defensible, because when we integrate into those property management software, we're the only solution that hosts can work with within the amenity category. So someone could come up on a local level, but it's not going to work with the PMS, that property management software, and Mount will. So that's why we can beat the local smaller players if they pop up.
Awesome. And what's been the hardest part to date?
Honestly, I was doing this in college and graduated last year. So I'd say that was the hardest, is just figuring out an actual product that people wanted, a solution, I guess you could say. And then finding that product market fit. Getting people believed and bought in, I guess, was not the hard part.
It's because everyone's traveled, and it would just be great to have stuff. And a lot of times the hosts have either no stuff or shitty stuff. Yeah.
And it's pretty intuitive. People understand it. So
it is pretty intuitive. And in theory, as you grow and scale, once you've got all the suppliers, you don't just have to be for Airbnbs and for travel. You can be for anyone, for anything. And actually crack the rental market for other products as well, as because it makes no sense for every single person in the US to own their own lawnmower. I'm sorry.
It does not.
It drives me nuts.
Yeah.